So next up is going to be Neville Pattinson. We're going to now kind of start to put that umbrella that we've all been asking for, to have a strategic plan that allows us to have a broader picture of the Identity Ecosystem Steering Group, and then you'll see how those subcomponents fit within. Online, you will have access now to the presentation and to the actual strategic plan document. So if you do have a wireless access, you can pull up the full document. The password is plenary. And our remote attendees have joined us now. So we all are now one happy family. I was thinking about just real quickly, I was thinking about all the references that Jeremy was making around the jerk and everything else. And then I thought about my presentation, and I was like, mine's like the Toy Story, right? Infinity and Beyond and all these other kind of things. So I kind of just felt a little childish now. No, but I think it's really important, though, that we do think about the beyond piece of it when we listen to the strategic plan, because this is intended to allow us to see how we are today and where we need to go tomorrow. So, Neville?
Come with a picnic because we're going to need it. If you haven't had a coffee, this is the time to make sure you get one. So we're going to be here for about an hour or maybe an hour and a half. My name is Neville Pattinson. I am honored to serve on the board on the Management Council and Security Stakeholder seat, elected by the Security Stakeholder Group. We have been working on a strategic plan for the IDESG. Something that I felt was missing personally for quite some time, and I guess my big mouth put me in the driver's seat for this in terms of needing this particular initiative. So we have a slide deck here, which is also posted. If you look at the IDESG website, you go to today's agenda, you'll find this presentation there. You'll also find the strategic plan document itself. In both Word and PDF forms for you to download and consume and hopefully comment on. So I'm going to go through a slide deck here. It's just going to give you an outline and some of the highlights of the contents. It's not entirely a table of contents that I'm going to go through, but it will cover each section and show you what's there. So why did we do this? We did this for strategic planning purposes. So here I'll just get everybody on the same page. This is the definition on Wikipedia for strategic planning, so I'm sure it's correct. So this is really a process. It's a continuous process. It's not something that we've done and we're throwing out and saying, you know, dust our hands off, we're completed. This is very much a living process. So strategic planning has taken place over the last couple of months, more intensively in the last 3 weeks to produce this first version of the document. So we've had a lot of input from various people, and for that we had a deadline. Part of the funding requirement that has been given, that 1.6 million this year, requires us as an organization to present a strategic plan to the NPO by September the 20th, which is Saturday. So I know they don't work Saturday usually, but anyway, we'll have it to them anyway. It's basically finished today. Are we good? Oh, there's a clicker. Yeah, I'm on the wrong one. Okay, thank you. I've got to keep myself in sync. Thank you. So on the initiative, we have this particular deadline. We have, I believe, achieved that as we closed out the strategic plan yesterday. Several drafts of this were shared on the Management Council Reflector, and we've put a lot of input from people that were prepared to spend time reviewing the document. So the editorial comments that I got, where people had shown me different ways of presenting things or correcting the intent, I have put those in. Where I received statements or questions, I didn't put those in yet. They need further debate as we move forward and create version 2. So the initial version of the strategic plan, as I said, it's a living document. This is not by any means finished. This is just the first one that had to meet that deadline. It was tasked by the board to have this done in order to meet that requirement of the NPO's grant requirements. We had a very hard deadline to meet, but I'm happy to report that we've done that. Many people have been in this version, but I'm not claiming it's 100% perfect. There are always room for improvement and things to add, etc. So from the plenary perspective, you have the first cut, which met I hope, the NPO's needs, but now I'm opening it up for the next round to create version 2 of the strategic plan. So what is the strategic plan? It lays out a lot of the IDESG activities that we've currently got in one document so that everybody can refer to this document and look at what are we doing, who's doing it, when's it going to be done by, etc. So on that basis, all of the committee works that's going on is included in here, all of their deliverables and timelines, and we've tried to put in dates to show when the various committee members and committees are going to come up with their particular input. So you can see this document, I see it as the glue for this organization. It's bringing a collection of all of the activities into one place. And then from there, we can see, oh, well, that is out of line with that. Maybe we need to adjust the timeline, or, hey, we're missing a deliverable that needs to go into this particular committee from that one. We've got at least a place where everything is recorded as of now. Clearly, that will change in due course. So it's really to help coordinate everything from the organizational side of things to the work products coming out of the committees. So this is, for me, a very key document for allowing anybody in the plenary, anybody that wants to know what IDESG is doing, to be able to find out what are all these things going on. I don't understand what an IDEF is. You can refer to this document. You can find out what it is, who's working on it, if there's a version coming out now, if there's a version coming out later, etc., etc. So see this as a very strategic umbrella document for the whole organization. So the outline of the document, there are basically 13 sections, 12 numeric and 1 appendix. The names after these are the folks that took some significant ownership of these sections. So Michael Garcia helped with the situational analysis, Anna Madland with the key IDESG function section, Kimberly Sutherland was working on section 8, and Ellen from the NPO helped with the table of the appendix, which is a collection of everything that's going on for a simple reference. So if you get a chance to download that document, scan through it, you can kind of see this as a structure that we're done. And as we go through, I'm going to ask certainly some of these folks to give us their input as to how they went about it and what they've done and how the section's structured. So the scope of the plan, first of all, just this is section 4 of the plan. This is a plan required to show what we're doing in the next 18 months. So between now and roughly the end of next year. That's the major kind of bracket that we're trying to capture in this strategic plan. Doesn't mean that there aren't things in it that go on beyond that into 2016, 2017. They're mentioned. Certainly the funding model is mentioned there, and a few other things are mentioned. But the basic scope of this is to give us some short to medium term guidance as to what the activities are that need to be done and when and how and by who. So the section 5, the situational analysis, is an overview of the IDESG. It just defines who we are, legal entities, etc. And then it goes through a SWOT analysis, the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. I recommend you take a read of those and kind of digest if you consider them complete. Perhaps there are some more things we can add to each of those sections in the SWOT. It's certainly got a lot of challenges in there. There's a nice list of strengths, but as you go through, the threats are quite small. So I'm sure we can balance that with more input in terms of looking at what are the other things that we need to do beyond just the strengths of the organization. So this situational analysis really just defines where we are today and what the kind of the immediate challenges that we have and opportunities we have. So take a look at that section and you kind of get a feeling of where we think we are in terms of vulnerability and you know, the good stuff we've got going on. The strategic objectives section, section 6, is devised into a number of objectives. The first one, you know, all of these are the objectives of the organization. There's 3 slides coming here. This is the first of the 3 that talk about the objectives. So this is the key drivers that this organization is working on. And I think you'll all see that the plan of these is basically in line with what you're aware of. So the first one is really about driving us to that self-sustaining or financially self-sustaining organization prior to calendar 2017, and you'll see that further down in the slide decks as to what's going on and how that's being achieved. We need to have a financial membership, sponsorship, fees put in place, and we need to have that happening very soon because that's part of the ability to become self-sustaining. We're not going to do it overnight. We're going to transition there over a few years, and we show that in the strategic plan. It's not something that we can do instantly, but we know the money will run out, and we need to be self-sustaining at that point. An organizational maturity plan is also going to be done by the end of December. Peter Brown will own that particular objective as our board chair, and he will lead that initiative and use resources as needed. But that's the way of looking at our current structure, our current activities, working out if we need to reorganize, reset, look at the rules of association. I think they need to be opened up and taken a look at again in order to align with current situation and where we want to be in terms of our you know, future organizational structure, etc. So the strategic objectives at a different level, rather than an organization, we're looking at the version 1 of the identity ecosystem. We need to establish that. So this is a short-term goal by the end of the year, mentioned in the strategic plan. A functional model, okay, that will be discussed later in the plenary. That's up for, it's published now, version 1 is done. We then have IDESG defined requirements. These things are ongoing, and they basically need to be part of the underpinnings of many of the activities going on in the organization. A Trustmark program scope aligned with the IDEF needs to be put together by the end of this year. So remember, that's kind of the Trustmark getting its foundation in terms of how this works and making it align with what the identity ecosystem framework is putting out, which you'll see this afternoon. And some scoping statements we need to kind of bracket the type of transactions and so on that the Trustmark program would cover. So moving to 2015 objectives, we need to then, realize that by the end of 2014 we finished that first slide, we hope. Now that slide just shown, and now we move on to 2015. So a year later, in terms of full 12 months of work, establish the risk assessment framework, instituting a third-party compliance program, developing implementation tools, and then launching the Trustmark program. So the detail behind this you can find within Section 7 of the strategic plan. But these are the objectives. These are the key measurables that we've set ourselves for 2014 organizational, and then 2014 and 15 framework-based. So these are the key objectives that we'll measure ourselves and pace ourselves and try and align all of the committee work to produce the various deliverable components needed for those achievements. So at this point, we're going to move on to Section 7, and I'm hoping that Adam Madlin can join us on the phone. I'm not sure if that's on the online side, if he can join. I'll just mention that we're going to have a Q&A session at the end of this. So start thinking of questions about the strategic plan if you've got a chance to start looking at the main document. I know it's a lot to digest. There's 40-something pages of it. But certainly I'm going to allow time in the course of this for us to open it up, and as the owner, I have the target on my front, my back, and anywhere else you like. But I'm happy to take input. I'm not sure I'll be able to record it immediately, but we can certainly start the process of version 2. So I'm going to ask Adam Madlin, who took Section 7 ownership, and let him lead the discussion from here. Over to you, Adam.
Neville, can you hear me?
Indeed. Thank you.
Okay, there's a little bit of feedback, so I'll do my best. Hi, everybody. This is Adam. I would like to say a few things about Section 7. It is very hard to hear, so just bear with me. I took responsibility for Section 7. When I first started on it, I reached out to team members, committee chairs, and researched all the available information that was already published or in process. So it's important to know that what I attempted to do here is assemble and make better sense of information that was already available. So Section 7 really covers a number of categories that represent the bulk of the work and deliverables that we'll be focusing on during the period that this plan represents. We identified all these things that we call key functions and broke them down into 3 categories: development plan, building blocks, and then additional focus areas. So to the next slide. What this section really represents is where we are today, what we're doing, and where we're going. And it attempt to describe what the work effort and deliverables so that they're easily understood, to determine short, medium, and long-term outcomes for them, and to assign some sort of a priority to where these work products fit, either within their own work stream or the overall work stream. This section does represent a bulk of the strategic plan, and it's also primarily focused on informing the work of the various committees for the different work streams. So, final slide that I'll comment on, we can move to, it just shows the different sections. Again, they've been broken up into these 3 categories. Section on the overall development plan itself, which we're going to be covering shortly. And then what we define as building blocks, which are the functional model, the guiding principle requirements, risk assessment framework, compliance and performance program, and a whole series of tools that are either being worked on or planned, and they're pretty well defined within the document. And then in addition, there are these other areas that are very important to the IDESG that we've identified related to the ongoing maturity of the organization, business development activities and stakeholder engagement activities, communications, outreach, and brand development, and then the whole operational side of the IDESG, which we addressed in the 2 next sections: operations and services, and the framework management and SME support. So it's a very important section, and I encourage everybody to review it in detail and provide feedback. I know some of the committees will be looking at it in detail to impact or inform their own specific plans over the next couple of days. So I look forward to feedback from the entire organization office. Thanks, Neville.
Thank you, Adam. I appreciate that. I would just say that this, as Adam has said a couple of times, this is really probably about 70% of the content of the strategic plan. And this is where you should be able to see your contribution in terms of the committee work somewhere within that section. If it's not, let us know. We need to add it. There is a section 7.4, which is just a link that goes to now what's called Appendix A, which we'll discuss in a minute, but that's the tables where everything's been assemble together for a quick glance at all of the activities and the timelines and so on. So moving on, there's Section 8, which is all about the financial self-sustaining plan for the organization, how that's going to be achieved. We've set 3 objectives, which are shown here, Phase 1, Phase 2, and Phase 3 at different timelines, to start to bring in revenues from other sources. This may be membership dues, it may be sponsorship dues. We even discussed having a bake sale yesterday. Anything we can find to bring income into the IDESG in a constructive manner to help start to offset the funding from the federal funding. So just a little bit about calendar years, grant years, fiscal years, and so on. The reason this is saying by the end of June is to give us about a 1 month's grace till the end of July. The grant years in the U.S. government work from August the 1st to July the 31st. So it's not even in line with the fiscal year that they use. It's not in line with the calendar year. So just to get understood, the reason it says June is because we're trying to get it done by July, which is when the when the grant year runs out. So $50,000 is needed by the end of July, or certainly we hope by June next summer. And then, as you can see, the 2 other major goals. And we have this in a nice graphical form here to show you the challenges that we've got moving forward beyond that timeline into the 2017-2018 non-grant year. When we run out of money, we have to transition 100% to a self-sustaining organization. So this is really showing that we're trying to take sensible and incremental steps to transition from government funding to a self-sustaining organization. But once the grant money is done, then it's all up to us. So that transition at the end of the last year, in terms of the bottom bar there, which is all red, we have to find a way of doing that. Suddenly, beyond the baby steps we've been setting ourselves, we now have to take some pretty serious steps in terms of the funding requirements. So everybody start being creative and applying your budget process, which I'm sure some of you are starting to now. Certainly in industry, the budget cycle seems to start earlier and earlier. Start allowing for maybe some sponsorships and membership fees, et cetera, in the oncoming years. So the income plan, what are we prepared to do to earn and bring in revenue? Sponsorships of plenary organization activities, membership dues, certification, trust mark fees, individual corporate donations, grants. It's not an exhaustive list. You can add to this. So we're always interested in people who've got creative ways of providing, ways of generating revenue. Any of you that are feeling very generous, you can always make donations. But yep, there's really got to become an income plan based on as many creative ways as we can to organize this in terms of the organization being able to become self-sufficient. Section 3 is a stakeholder outreach plan. We need to have a good communication strategy moving forward. That needs to identify and interact with groups and stakeholders and relying parties, etc., to find the folks that we need to retain and keep and fund this organization. A suitable messaging framework needs to be put together to help transmit the mission, the vision, etc., out to the organizations that we want to have participate and remain and become hopefully participants and endorsers of the various IDESG activities. Membership growth plan is required in order to generate a future self-sustaining organization. We need to retain, attract, and bring in potential funding from all these membership types. So you can see the kind of breakdown, the study that was done by one of the board subcommittees. Looking at the membership breakdown, you can see there's quite a chunk of commercial, but there's also quite a chunk of individuals. So we've got to try and make the funding for fee membership quite fair and appropriate, but we've got to understand how we're going to be generating enough income. So let's not just hit the commercial guys for high membership fees, but let's give them the opportunity to do sponsorships, whatever it may be, as well, to get their branding out, if that's the case. All sorts of discussions. We're happy to hear what everybody would suggest and help us in the mission of creating a membership growth plan and evangelizing. And every member of the IDESG should be evangelizing, in my view, to anybody they meet. How would you like to join? How could you contribute, et cetera, et cetera. This is an organization that needs to propagate itself out to find more membership and participants over time. Section 9 of the strategic plan, it's just pretty much a statement of what the organization is today, with a little graphic to try and put that on some sort of logic, but I'm not saying it's completely accurate or complete, and I'm sure arrows can go two ways. So this is just really a statement of what we are today so that we can at least understand what we are today and where we want to be in the future. So Section 9 also includes the roles and responsibilities for each of these entities that are defined so that we can at least say, okay, if that's what it is today, maybe we want it to do something different in the future. So this is just a snapshot of today as far as the organization, because I'm on the board, but I'm completely confused sometimes how this organization works. So at least we've now got somewhere, you've got a place to go and say, okay, well, in the strategic plan it says this, so finally understand maybe. So in Section 10, there's some resources, just discusses a lot of the categories of resources that will be participants in some form of this organization. Obviously an executive director, outsourcing activities, bringing in folks to help us in the organizations, membership, how is that going to contribute, etc. Also finances, internal communications, external communications, all the kind of resources that we need to help generate the right level of interest, the right level of content that we need to explain to people. This is what we are, this is what we're about, etc., etc. Sure you get the picture. So thank you to the people working on this particular document. This is probably a non-exhaustive list, but it's as best as I could do as I went through receiving lots of comments and inputs over the last 3 weeks. These are the folks beyond the management board, management council, that have helped give me very constructive feedback. So hopefully you can see there's a fairly good cross-dimensional team there of folks that have put in their input. It's really something that I'm hoping that we can now take to the next level with the plenary input and for constructive reviews coming from elsewhere. Appendix A, I'm going to ask Ellen if she would mind standing up to the mic and just giving us a few thoughts on what she did to create this. And in terms of introduction, if you go to Appendix A in the document, you're going to find several pages of tables of information, which is really, to me, a real good resource to go and look at what the heck is going on in this organization and who's doing it by when and where. So, Ellen.
Hello. For those of you who don't know me yet, my name is Ellen Nadeau, and I just started working with the NPO a few weeks back, so I'm sure we'll be getting to know each other. So I was involved in helping out with this appendix here. Basically, we took what Adam had done with Section 7 with all the different functions and put it into an easy-to-read format. Basically, we have the focus areas, and we split those up, as we were discussing earlier, into IDSG building blocks, into the IDF development plan, and also the and then the IDSG focus areas. So in there, we divided ownership, so committees or MC members or board members can easily go through and see what deliverables are we responsible, what processes fall under us, and then we also have a timeline, and as they mentioned earlier, this was pulled from discussions with chairs, but we welcome feedback, so we do have different versions of deliverables, when they're expected to be due, what the priorities are, and if you open up the document, you'll see this at the end. So, and again, we do welcome lots of feedback. We'd love to update this, so please let us know. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. And you'll see in the table there are probably areas that you can debate, discuss, change. Please send us input so we can make this table a quick reference guide for everybody to know who's got ownership, timelines, content, and so on. I think it's a very useful collective reference point for everybody to really work out what's going on where. Because that's been one of the complete puzzles to me, just as an individual, is just keeping a handle on what all these committees are doing. Even though I'm trying to watch several of them, there are more than anybody can digest in any sensible time frame. So at least this is a point where you can go either Section 7 for the detail or Appendix A for a snapshot of all of that, put in a simple, easy-to-read form. So the next steps for this strategic plan, as of yesterday, this plan was sitting at the 8th revision, and the board approved the revision yesterday with some changes. So rather than going out for drinks immediately after we finished the Management Council meeting, I spent 2 hours doing the hideous amount of changes that they asked me to do anyway. So they were all done, and going to talk to Ian later about moving that to Appendix A. That was a beast, that table. Anyway, we did that. So version 1 was officially cast last night, and as I said, it's on the website. And now I guess we have to formally hand it to Jeremy or whatever he wants, but it's on the website. It's done. If there's a ceremony we need to do, let me know. But good, thank you. So as I said, it's already on the document library. I'm presenting it to you at the plenary today, giving you the overview of the initiative, of what and why and how we did this, and also the content, a quick overview of that. Obviously, we're now seeking input from the next version. But I'd also hope that you feel that this is a useful document. I hope you don't feel that you've not been incorporated in it too badly. What I would say is we were under that timeline and deadline to get that done. So I apologize if you didn't have a lot of time or even any chance to give me input, but we had to kind of hunker down and work at warp speed, so as Kim was saying, to get this first version done. At this point, I'm happy now to take input for version 2, and we'll work on that in version 3 and version 4. This needs to be a living document that we all own and that we can all see makes sense for this organization and allow us to have a common method of communicating what everybody's doing. So it will need updating, and be happy to have volunteers join us for the next version. So at this point, I will open it up for questions, discussions. As I said, I have the targets on my front and back, but first of all, I'm going to ask to beam me up, Scotty, before you start hitting me. Anyway, so thank you. Let's open it up. There are mics here on the floor, and if anybody online has comments or questions, I'm sure we can feed those through to me. So this is the point where we would like to get your feedback. If this is something you're comfortable with and see a value, if you see errors, changes of major things we've missed, then please use this time to give us some immediate feedback. So I open it up to anybody with any questions. And I must admit I can't see too well because the lights are pretty bright here. So I think you need to stand up and come to a mic if you could. They seem to be in a shadowy area. So. And please introduce yourself when you come to the mic.
Good morning, Jamie Clark from Oasis. Thanks, Neville, for what sounds like an awful lot of work in a very compressed time frame. Could you talk a little bit about your planned time frame for your version 2? Because I would guess you're not going to get a lot of detailed feedback on a 40-page document between now and Friday, while people are also supposed to be doing their work here. But in terms of hitting that next target and when it would be next useful for you to have some detailed feedback from these constituencies, ours included, what's the plan? What's the schedule?
Thank you, Jamie. I would say I'm open to another revision fairly quickly in terms of we had to get something done. If there are things missing or errors or significant contribution that I can incorporate fairly quickly, I'll do a tidy up version. So I'm happy to do one moderately quickly. Then I would take on a longer time frame to get more input and maybe a committee together to come up with more time to put thought in and consideration, but also to update it as things change. I think we've got things that are being released and published in the course of the next few months. As they get done, certainly by the end of the year, we'll have those short-term 2014 objectives hopefully done. So we need to come up with, okay, what's the update from them? So I'm happy to do a fix-up pretty quick with input, and then maybe the next one is early next year. Next question.
Yes, well, that was my first question, so thank you.
Please introduce yourself.
Yes, Angela Ray. My second question was, in the organizational structure, I saw you had a C6 and not just the 501c3.
Correct.
I was hoping you could comment on that. And then I'll give you all together, and then you can comment on that. The last item was, I'm sorry, it just, so what you're saying is, as of now, you fulfilled the requirement of delivering the,
correct, version
the
1.
strategy. Okay.
Yep. So that milestone is checked.
Okay.
So the organization has two structures, legal entities. They were done in order to allow us to operate as a incorporative company organization. There's also another branch created as a sub-function of the main one that allows it to receive donations or lobby. And the way the C3 and C6 organizes, you have a main organizational function. We chose the one we did, and then the other one is a sub-function to allow the other activities to go, and we keep them legally separated. So I can't see Kim in here. She did a lot of the work on that. She must have stepped out. But we've got a whole document on that, and if you go on the File Depot, you should find, I think, a document about the business structure and how we were organizing. Kim's just walked in. The question came on the C3, C6 relationship, why we have the two in the organization.
I'm sorry, just to clarify, I understand why you have the two because of lobbying. I guess what I'm curious about is, I'm going to ask Jeremy Reck, you can't use federal funds for lobbying purposes.
Exactly correct. We have to keep that as a separate organization.
So we have an organization, and so where is the C6 being funded?
The C6 is basically dormant. The board made a decision, when you're incorporating, it basically costs the same to do two as one. So the board made a decision saying if there was a point when they wanted to engage in activities more fitted to that of a C6 than a C3, they basically have it there. But I don't believe they've made any decisions to do anything with it at this point. And you're correct, the federal dollars could not be supported for those activities.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So in the future, if we do need to have our C6, we don't have to pay any extra money to get it moving.
So it's not involved with any federal dollars is the main thing. Next question. Colin, come and introduce yourself.
I'm known to most of you, Colin Wallace. I've got to be very careful how I phrase this because I don't want it to be taken the wrong way. It's so understandably, as the vice chair of international, I did a word search, and the word international comes up once in the strengths that you have an international diverse group of folks, and that was good. It was good to see. Now I've got to be really careful here. I can understand why you may not have the existing committees necessarily all in the strategic plan. This is the point at which, there may be some slicing and dicing, and there are some committees that are on the critical path, and there's some that are not, and that's absolutely understood. But want to point out that one of the things that the International Committee wanted to do was to try and help the IDESG not become introverted in its outlook, so that it could be aware of other initiatives from overseas. And I'm going to spend a little bit of time on that at the Birds of the Feather. I'm not really a presentation as such, but just make you aware that we're actually, as a group, we're filing some stuff in File Depot there that you might be able to look at. So my sense was, and I've got to be careful that it's not, oh, us too, please.
We forgot to put you in, is what you're saying, Colin, right?
I just want to make sure, I'm not, it's not that. It's actually, I would like you to think about whether you want the International Committee in there. So, you know, if you actually feel that it's structured okay at the moment and you want the International Committee to kind of do what it's doing but not have any kind of formal recognition in the strategic plan, that's okay. You know, that's a view. The other alternative is perhaps that, you know, you might want to include it. I don't want to press the point too hard, but just, yeah.
I see I have a volunteer to give me input for the strategic plan for the next version. I fully agree, Colin. We worked hard and diligently. We tried to assemble everything together. Yes, we have made some, you know, errors. We've missed this in content. I'd love to incorporate it. I spent time with some of the chairs, but obviously we just didn't get to that one. So very valid point. Thank you. And I would encourage you or whoever from the International Committee to feed us, certainly me, the objectives, the work items, the scope, the you know, activities that your committee's doing. Absolutely, it should be part of the strategic plan, as the international side is extremely important, especially when we see things like IDESG from Europe coming up and wanting to connect with us and things like that. Just one example. So
thanks. So there are about half a dozen of us actually in the room. Some spread over a number of
fabulous. So please coordinate and send me the collective feedback. I'd be very happy to put it in, and a very valid comment. Thank you. Next question.
Jack Seuss. I'm on the Management Council and TIFDM. One question I have is, as we think about the requirement for this to be approved by NIST, we're submitting this plan into NIST, and I want to compliment you and Adam. I know how quickly and how much work you've had to do in a short period of time to get to this point. What I'm curious about is, will future revisions need to always go to NIST, or once it's approved as a strategic plan, that's the checkbox in the grant, but future iterations of the strategic plan may be owned more fully within the IDESG, or do they also need to go to NIST and be reviewed?
I'll let Jeremy respond, but I can imagine we need to do it at least annually for the funding.
So the one requirement to have something done by September 20th was essentially part of a funding gate that we put into the new grant. And part of it was, from our side, we thought it was very important if we were actually giving IDESG Incorporated the funding, they needed to come up with a detailed plan pretty quickly in terms of what would happen with it. Beyond that, there aren't any other gates that are built in around a strategic plan, but the grant is a cooperative agreement, which is essentially something that envisions substantial involvement with NIST. So I think it'll be something, our long-term goal is for this group to grow into something that will be self-sustaining, and eventually, you know, we shouldn't matter. But in the interim, I think we'll probably continue to work closely with the board and at least provide feedback and whatnot into it.
So the follow-up, since I don't have anyone behind me, was often in these kinds of plans, you know, you would have a much smaller sort of business plan, and you may also have a tactical, you know, 1 year, 18 months operational plans. They're often not, they're related but not part of the strategic plan. And what I'm curious about is we have, in a way, sort of folded a lot of pieces into the strategy piece, and having the opportunity to potentially decouple those from this bigger strategic plan might be a helpful activity. I just didn't know how viable that was, and I'm just curious.
I think that, from my perspective, it's not a bad idea. I think it's up to the board where to go from there. You know, I think the main thing was the new board, since they'd incorporated, hadn't put something together. We view that as an essential condition of award, but the board should not feel limited. We'd like to see more. Right now, we just got through the first milestone.
So the key point that comes out of this is what you said, is we own this going forward.
Absolutely.
And so it's really up to everyone here to not just say, well, I don't have time to be updating it, but the fact is, going forward into the fall, if we're going to be thinking about other things, there is an opportunity where we need to be getting comment and thinking about what the next iterations may be.
Exactly. It's a living document. I hope everybody takes ownership of it moving forward. The hard work has been done to stuff everything into the first version. Yes, we'll introduce things we've forgotten. This is why we have review. So I would like to see this update and iterate, as I said, a short-term fix-up, and then another one with considered input. But to also respond to your question, I think Peter in the board is thinking of doing some of these ad hoc or committee, subcommittee areas specifically around the membership, the finances, and so on. So yes, the strategic plan covers everything, but specific items have to now be taken and worked on. This is not just a nice document. This has got a set of actions and deliverables for not just the board, the management council, the plenary, the committees. It's got actions for everybody, so it's spread around the entire organization. So this is just a collection of everything going on and try and coordinate it. And as we move forward, we can adjust it in any way appropriate. So as you said, this is owned by everybody now, and I'll just continue ownership until I get exhausted with it. Next question, sir.
Hi, Neville. This is Brett McDowell.
Hi, Brett.
So I skimmed the document, the actual document from the website, and it struck me, if I could just add to what you just said and the way you described it, it's almost like a plan for a plan, if you will. It captures, these are the things that we will need to decide exactly what we're going to do about.
The strategic.
Later. As opposed to, we're going to do this. Like this is the outcome we're pursuing. These are the desired outcomes we're pursuing and how we're going to pursue them. How would you characterize getting to the point where there will be documentation of what IDESG is going to do and how it's going? This is like a roadmap for figuring out exactly what we want. What do we want in membership? What do we want? What's the business model around membership, expenses? What's going to be in the framework? How are we going to defend the mark? What's going to be the mark? All the decisions that are kind of the keys for those watching IDESG and wondering how IDESG fits into the grand scheme of things. Would you think that's a different document, or is that what this is going to evolve into as those answers get made?
This is the capturing of everything. There will be specific, membership outreach, communication. There will be different work deliverables out of the committees, out of the board, out of the management council that I think will address those particular tactical, things that you're asking for. So the strategic plan is, this is what we need to do, and here are some goals we need to meet in order to just get this organization with a pace behind it. And then, as you say, if you need to have specific documents, I think they're going to come more out of that work item, out of a committee or a subcommittee, wherever it may be connected. And if you go to section or the Appendix A, that's where you'll see kind of the tactical timeline and results that are coming out there. And I think that's where they're appropriately going to come out from the work products of the committees.
Okay.
Thank you. Next.
There's an online comment, question actually, from Mary Hodder. She says, why does the strategic plan not have any actual dollars there? A total amount needed to run the organization, some specific uses within the total. I'd be happy to answer it.
Thank you, Kim.
So in the section that Neville showed around the revenue needs, and I think it was 8.2. We'll wait to go back a little bit more. Yeah, right there. We make an important point in that very first bullet, which says that the IDESG will need to adopt a revenue plan with key performance metrics by January 2015. So in order for us to receive the grant from NIST, we had to create a 3-year budget. That budget does exist, and we have categories that we have to have our funds come from, and we are allowed like a 10% deviation without having to resubmit requests for approval from NIST. But we don't have a formal revenue plan, and that has to happen next. We do have a budget again that we're working against that just kind of ties back our numbers when we have to do our reporting to NIST. And if you go on that next slide, the really important thing is we had to put some stakes in the ground around how much we're going to assume the ability to generate additional income outside of the federal funds. NIST does not give us the funding to allow us just to just exist off of their funds and then fall apart at the end. And so we have these little baby steps that take us up to $500,000 by year 3. But when you look at that 4th year, you see it goes to a huge number. And what we as a group have to decide is, do we reduce our operating expenses so that we can manage, so that we can have the income balance at a smaller amount? Or do we find a way, or, so we don't have what that number is. And so there's some luxuries that we are going to have as a result of the funding from NIST. Like, we're going to have a large amount of dollars to work on communications, outreach, and marketing. That's an important thing for our organization. Trying to get those people who are not at the table to try to make sure that our message is out there in a way that we can continue to share that with other organizations. But we may not need to have that significant amount of communications and outreach funds by year 4. So some of those things may be able to go down. We may decide that we don't need to have face-to-face plenaries more than twice a year. So we don't really have all of those things formalized yet, but we do have to have that figured out and approved by the plenary by January 2015. So after this plenary, there's going to be a lot of work that has to happen. We do not have another face-to-face schedule for the rest of the year. So please expect to have a remote plenary, a virtual plenary, that we can have some documents prepared in advance, that you can review those, and we have to get this approved by the end of January.
Thank you, Kim. Any other questions from our plenary, either in person or online?
And one more thing is that in the posted cooperative agreement, you can all see how we have those categories allocated to NIST and how we're working through those.
Okay. Anything coming from online anywhere? This seems to have exhausted everybody in the room. They're probably hungry. Okay, I think we'll conclude. Thank you for your attention. I hope you like this document. I hope that we can live with it, and let's get on and make another version that incorporates some of the errors and admissions, and I look forward to coming up with another version very soon. Thank you, everybody.